Good afternoon, Nat and Mark. It's been, not that long since you sort of temporarily retired from training, but sometime since you announced it. A very stunning announcement it was. Since then, you're probably adjusting to revised timetables and schedules. How's it been for you so far? Would you say, Mark, you've just obviously got the sales to have kept you occupied, but is there a change in routine for you already?
Oh yeah, probably a big change, Dave. I've done a lot of socialising and catching up with people, and which I've really enjoyed, and just makes you realise how the industry takes up so much of your time, and you are time poor when you haven't got the time to catch up with people. So I've really enjoyed that side of it. Good to be back home now and seeing what's going on in the barn and there for Hayden and Amanda.
What sort of routine do you have, the two of you now in the stable? I mean, obviously it's not full time, it's part time, but do you spend some time every day there, or is it just when we're on call, or how does it work?
Well, we're certainly going to be there and focus when it's sort of premier racing and the feature races. So at this stage, there's nothing in concrete apart from lead up to, as I say, those feature and premier days that we will be there.
But we will, last week, before I went up to Auckland, I spent the Friday in the barn just working some of the babies with Hayden to see where they were all at. And then yesterday, didn't we, Mark? We both were in the barn all morning just to have a drive on as many as we sort of could and just make sure they're all up to scratch. And I think it just gives Hayden a bit of peace of mind as well, just to say, yes, I'm on the right track.
It's a big challenge for him, even allowing for how competent he is. And Amanda, of course, great assistant, but taking over a stable of your magnitude is not an easy task. So any help he would appreciate, I'm sure.
Most definitely, hey Mark.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, no, it's a big challenge for him, but he's giving it 110%, and he's certainly he's been on the phone regularly and asking questions and how we do things. So he's trying very hard to make it work, and we have full confidence in him that he'll maintain the success that we've had.
What you're actually doing, a step back, is, it was a bit of a shock at the time, but it's becoming increasingly common in the industry, isn't it? I just quote Dave and Catherine Butt locally, who are premiership trainers and then cut back, and you've mentioned Dean Braun in Australia and even Jimmy in America, Jimmy Tactor. But was it something that you came to gradually, a conclusion you came to gradually, or was it something that you sort of just suddenly decided, right, we're going to do it? Natalie, what did you say?
No, we were thinking about it for quite a few years, Mark, weren't we? Probably the last two to 3 years, yeah. And we were actually going to make it next year, like next 2021, December. But after Cup Week, not 2020, the year before, we were at Hamner and Mark said, oh, stuff this, let's bring it forward a year. I just think it just takes such a toll on you. Like, not only are we training such a big team and managing such a big staff and so many good horses and all the travel that was involved, it just, like Mark said, you're so time poor and you're just all consumed by the industry, you forget to actually have any form of a life. So we've really been thinking about it for quite a while, Mark, haven't we?
Yes, yeah, that's right, yeah. And the timing felt right too. I think the length of time that I've been away and Nat to an extent too, out of the country and away from home and living out of a suitcase, it takes its toll, and there's a time where you say, well, I've had enough, and I think that time had sort of reached both of us.
Yeah, and I think too, Dave, it's also, like we touched on in the past, not only were we just training or just driving, or just managing a business, we were trying to wear every single hat. So we were training, driving, running the business, managing all the staff, the owners, the horses. We were basically running a multi-million-dollar business and doing every single thing. And some days, wouldn't it, Mark, if we had races, it would be nothing to do a 20-hour day. And then you'd still have stuff to do over your weekend and your Sunday, and it just never ended. And we probably just were both exhausted, weren't we?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You can only do it for so long.
I was not surprised that you did it for so long, because I know the hours that you put in, and it's not a great way to live if you want to do something else. But in previous eras, of course, trainers just kept training until they couldn't train anymore. But it's a bit different now, so you might as well take advantage of it while you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you just find them, you know, we've targeted all the major races in Australasia, so, you know, when you talk about those days, most of those trainers were pretty well confined to training in New Zealand, and certainly the racing calendar was a lot different than it is today, and there's so much more pressure on you, and you know, being involved in those Grand Circuit events, and having runners probably, in, you know, not uncommon for us to have runners in 3 states on one night. So, you know, the pressure just takes its toll.
And I think too, Dave, a lot of those trainers probably just lived for the now and trained day to day. We've like to have thought we've tried to run our business quite smart, haven't we, Mark? And we've run it like a business.
Yeah.
And we just probably have set ourselves up in a position where we don't need to be in the barn every single day anymore, do we?
No.
And I think that's been important. And I think a lot of trainers and people in our industry don't treat it like a business, so as then when they do want to retire or finish, they don't have a passive income. And I think that's really important, that, you know, people need to set themselves up for later in life.
Very true. It seems unlikely from the way you talk, but is it likely that you'll ever return to training at that level with those numbers of horses? Or have you just about, are you leaving the door open?
He'll be on his own if he does.
Yeah, no, I don't think we'll ever see us return to, you know, how we have operated. You know, whether it comes to just doing half a dozen or a dozen or something like that, it'll certainly be a role that we want to make it enjoyable and
Be able to fit other things around.
that's right. Yeah.
You don't have to been at school for very long and look around Rolleston to see that your magnificent training property here has probably got a limited lifetime, and because of the growing pressure of housing, and I'm sure that won't be news to you. But if in the event of something happening along those lines, would you be happy, Mark, for example, to start a new property and of slightly different description, probably a bit smaller, or have you sort of done that?
Probably haven't really got to that stage of thinking, Dave, because of the fact that zoning hasn't changed here. It will be a matter of time, and probably the time that it takes will depend, you know, whether it's in the short-term future, or whether, you know, it might be 4 or 5 years down the track, in which time, you know, you wouldn't entertain the thought of setting somewhere else up.
But I think too, Dave, like what you've just touched on there, setting up another place, with where the industry is at, you couldn't justify going in and over-capitalising on your property with where it's at and the prize money we're racing for, to buy the land, then to set it up. And this is probably the problem a lot of young people face. Where do you afford to buy the land, and how do you set it up to scratch? The amount of money you'd need just for your barn, your fencing, your tracks, and then you purchase your land as well. It's just way overs for what we race for.
The game's not particularly bright outlook for young people at this stage, because one of the biggest losses from my observation is the previous smaller professional trainer who could probably make a living and have enough owners to get through. Now that's often not the case, and so where do the young people who are in the game, where do they go?
It's worrying times, and it's probably something we haven't got the answer for, but you know, it all revolves around the stake money,
Which revolves around betting turnover, doesn't it?
Yeah, expenses have climbed so much, and stake money hasn't climbed with accordance with it. So it's certainly hard for young people, and even the trainers of today. They're all really struggling. So yeah, I really don't know the answers.
We were probably just very fortunate, Dave, that we did target the major feature races and we had such good success in them. But I don't know how trainers can survive just racing for $8,000 and $10,000 week in, week out, and with the expenses the way they are.
They're all actually trying to keep their fees down for the owners, which is great, but it's not doing themselves any good either.
No, and of course forces them to sell just about any rising star now, it seems, these days.
Well, that's right, Dave, and even your lovely young horses, and maybe a 3 or 4 year old that's lightly raced, if he wins 3 or 4 races, you know, usually then he's out of grade, he's never had a chance to learn to race and be a racehorse, and so he's racing out of grade, so it's easier just to collect your 100,000 or 150, whatever you may get for him. So therefore that whole middle bracket just is sold overseas. And then the top level, there's so few races for them that it's easy just to sell them, Mark, isn't it? Like people are just happy to move them on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they seem too much emphasis for me in catering for R40s to R55 horses, and hence, you know, if you get a nice horse that climbs the ladder, well, he's pretty well selected. He's got to meet the same horses all the time. I don't think there's enough opportunities for better horses and for owners to get a return when they do get a nice horse.
Well, I think there's an example of that in Ashley Lopez, who was raced by a racing-oriented partnership, people who love watching him race and wanted to go to the races. Have kept him as long as they possibly could, but it was a fairly hard row for them because what you say, there was no free-for-all at Forbury to let him win. He had to run against Self-Assured and company most of the time or all the time.
That's right, yeah, and you've got to remember too, most owners aren't in the game to make money, so it's a matter of opportunity and enjoying seeing their horse race, and if it's a matter of going down to Forbury and there's a nice free-for-all on that you know, just made those top horses exempt from, but yet he was still, you know, still competitive in, they'd be happy to keep him.
How much did COVID affect you or affect the business and the stable, and did it play a role in you bringing the date forward?
No, we'd already made that decision by then, hadn't we? It was in concrete after the Cup 2019,
yes.
wasn't it?
Yeah, but probably after that, and when COVID came in, it probably did make us feel like it was an appropriate time to take a step back, with knowing that travel restrictions were going to, you know, hold everything this year.
It must have been a tough time for you though, because you rely on stake money, and there wasn't any stake money, and you know, it was a fairly tough time for everybody, really.
Yeah, you know, it was probably a big loss for us for some of the feature races and the horses we had to contend those races that looked like, you know, being big chances. So yeah, it was a big loss for us as far as stake money goes.
Just to turn to Australia for a moment, I presume there's no hit and run plan for Sydney, the way things are set up with those races, but that's another big loss for you, potentially.
Yes, that's right, yeah. Yeah, as it's turned out, and as I say, it's probably worked out good for us making this decision this year.
And it's probably turned out a little bit, on hindsight for Hayden even, when you spread yourself so thin when you're starting, it makes it very hard. So if he had horses going to Australia as well now, it would be very hard on him as well. So it's probably worked out in his favour a little bit, even though it doesn't appear to be, it probably is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But those horses will have restricted opportunities here before the end of the season.
Yes, they will.
Very restricted. Yep.
Yes, which makes it more difficult. And in Australia now that Nathan's gone to Australia, I think he's gone now, Mark, will you have an advisory role there too, if they can get rid of this COVID, or are you just going to leave him to make his way?
Oh, look, Nathan's very good at asking questions and wanting to learn, and you know, he's always, if he's been away with horses at Crans, he's always just asked me opinions and things like that. So I've always been there to help him, and nothing will change. I'll still be there and giving him advice and trying to lead him down the right path.
Yes, Dean Braun has done much the same thing as you two?
Yes, he has. Yeah, that's what he wanted to do, take a step back and just do a couple of his own. So, you know, Nathan stepping in there has worked out ideally for Dean as well.
And Natalie, what have you got planned for the? You're a very resourceful lady, and you've no doubt you've got a few trips and climbing hills and other things to claim.
Yeah, there's probably nothing in concrete just yet. It was still the first few weeks of January was still tidying up a lot of the business side of stuff. Once everything opened up again after New Year, so that's sort of all been said and done now and dusted off, and probably now we'll just we'll get the caravan soon, don't we? And we just go for a bit of a drive. I'm actually going to do a uni course, which is something I'm looking forward to. I like keeping my mind active, so always nice to sort of keep bettering yourself, I think, and always have things to think about and do. And as I like keeping active, I always take the dogs for a run or a bike ride or go walking up in the mountains somewhere. So there's plenty to do, Dave. It's just a matter of getting off your backside and doing it.
Yes, but of course, the two of you are steeped in harness racing and horses. You know, do you feel it'll be a long absence, or are you thinking that it might not be all that long after the year?
We're not too sure, Mark, are we really, how we'll feel then?
No.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. This is just my gut feeling. If maybe like a couple that we might own or have shares in, maybe just to potter around with them, maybe after 12 months, hey, just to get the foot back in the door a little bit. But we'll just wait and see, Dave. There's nothing set in concrete.
No.
But we're 100% happy to support Hayden, and we really want him to do well.
Yes, as always, Oscar. Mark?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. I just want your opinion, people may be interested, because I noticed that the All Stars racing team in the past season or so, there's been fewer horses running in the rating ranks, handicapping ranks, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. You've had mainly age group horses and not so many of the older variety. Is this a direct result of the rating system? Has that affected your thinking?
Yes, it has. Yeah, certainly. You sort of know your capabilities of a horse too, and if you've got the best 3-year-old or the best 2-year-old and the best 3-year-old in the country, well, they're predominantly the ones that are going to go on and be good open company horses. But you know, if you've got one where you realise, well, he's 4th or 5th in line and he's climbed the rating system, when you know he's going to come out as a 4-year-old and who he's going to be racing, it's certainly influential in the decisions you make to get the good money for him, or you know, retain him when you know he's not going to be that competitive and probably cost yourself money in the end.
And I think too, Dave, like you just said, touch on your 4 and 5-year-olds in your rating, say they're just your rating. Like we said, I think you said at Addington, there's a meeting coming up, and the highest rating horse that can race there is a rating 60. So if you've got a 5-year-old and he's up to a rating 60, he hasn't earned you a lot of money, I don't believe. He's probably cost you money to get there, and we weren't in the business of keeping horses that cost money. So we targeted them feature races for a reason, because that's where you earn money.
And horses like One Change, there've been others, but he's one who come out of 3-year-old racing and they're pitched in at the deep end.
Well, that's why he went to Australia, wasn't it?
That's right, and he went with Amazing Dream for the same reason. You know, they were both open company rated horses here, and you know, hence, you know, our feature race calendar, you just dictated to where you race and who you're going to be racing. You can't sort of dodge your opposition. So both of those horses went to Australia for the same reason, that they landed over there and they were still 3-year-old till the end of December, and they could race, in Amazing Dream's case, the fillies and mares, and One Change.
In his own grade, wasn't he?
In his own grade, which he was sort of compensated for in comparison to the rating system here.
And not only that too, Dave, the way it is here with the rating system, you're forced to basically have them all in the one race. Like, that's no good for us as trainers and drivers, and it's no good for our owners, because you know, you've got all the all-star horses all in one race. You might have 3, 4, 5 in one race, and it's taken away, I believe, a little bit of the skill in placing your horses and your programming. Now you're basically just herded into one race. And I know it might suit some people that have their rating 40 to 50s and they can take them everywhere, and that's great. But I just don't think, like for us and this team that we had, it just wasn't a viable thing, was it, Mark?
No.
How do you see them, Mark? You've had a look around the horses, the yearlings. What's your feeling about how the sale might go, and what sort of class you've seen so far?
Going to be interesting, Dave, and sales are always hard to predict, but you know, obviously we're not going to have participation from Australia here, so you'd think that would have a big influence. Look, I hope it goes good, for some of the vendors I've seen have done a really good job. So I hope for their sake it's a strong sale, but as I say, they're always hard to predict, and just never know.
Yeah, well, of course, I always say every sale is a good sale, Mark. It's either good for the seller or good for the buyer.
Very true.
Have you had much to do with them? Have you looked into yearlings yet, Natalie?
Yes, yep, we've done all. We're lucky enough to go to Bricken Farms and had a really good look at their draft and their farm. They were really quite strong, weren't they? And then I actually came home and Mark went and did Woodlands, and then we'll start doing a lot of the South Island, you know, over the next week or two, won't we?
Yes, yeah.
And what do you feel? Have you been pleased with what you've seen? Is it standard just as usual? Or?
Oh,
better?
yeah, they've done a very good job, haven't they, Mark, the ones we've seen?
Yeah, Reckon Farms, it's a credit to them, the mares they've got now, and it's, you know, just through hard work by Ken and Karen that, you know, they've set the benchmark a bit higher now, I believe, and, you know, for their sake, for what they've put into it, and not only with the horses but with the farm too, it's a real showplace, so we hope they're well rewarded come sale time.
You two, beside running the most successful stable in Australasia, have owned the two best horses of this century, Blackie and Laz. And do people in your position sort of always hope that there's another one coming? Is it something that you think about? I wonder if I get another Laz or another Blackie, even though they're going to have to be real good. But I mean, is that still a driver for you, looking for that special horse?
Well, I think, Dave, probably a little bit of the reason that we chose to do what we've done is there was not a race we still had to win. Like, you know, in your heart, there's always, I want to win that Miracle Mile, or I want to win the New Zealand Cup, or I want to win it Inter Dominion. And when you've sort of been there and you've done that, and done it more than once, as a rule, haven't we? We've been so lucky to have trained and driven such beautiful horses that when you lose that, I think that was a bit of a time for us to say, hey, but you're always looking for a great horse, but do we need him? Personally, I don't.
No.
I'm not expecting to get another Laz.
And I guess that does work a wee bit on your incentives to some extent. You've been at the top of the mountain, so getting up there again is not quite the same, is it? Quite so urgent.
No, and I think, you know, probably there was a time where, you know, Nat said, there's one race I'd like to win, it was the New Zealand Cup, and I said, well, there's only one race I'd probably like to win that I hadn't won, was a Miracle Mile, and we both did it.
That year, it was the same year we both, yeah.
Yeah, so it was sort of mission accomplished in a way.
Yeah. And I think that was probably when we actually did, wasn't it? That was about 2017.
Yes.
That's when we started thinking about what we were going to do now. And it wasn't a flash in the pan decision. It wasn't a quick made decision. It was well structured, well thought out, wasn't it, Mark?
Yeah.
Well planned.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. We think we handled it really well.
Went very smoothly.
Yes, yeah.
Well, so far, Dave, anyway.
You just getting to the end finally. You've had a lot of supporters over the years. You've had a lot of knockers, but they don't really count. You've had an extraordinary number of supporters, people who are just amazed at what you've achieved, and owners who must be amazed at what you've achieved. Do you think of those people, the fans and the followers, not necessarily the owners, but just the followers? Are they people that you consider quite a bit of the time like to thank for their support? Or do you regard it as, well, it's a profession and that's what we do?
Oh, no, definitely. You've got to be thankful for the people that were always there for you, and the ones that after a good meeting, just out of the blue, would send a lovely email or text or something that you'd never expect, hey, Mark. And we know a lot of elderly people that really followed our barn, and we understand that it'll be a bit sadder for them because they always looked forward to us, didn't they, Mark? We've had people say to us, Mum always got the paper and, you know, watched every race you had and always put their dollar on you or something. So we're very thankful to those people, and we do appreciate that they'll probably miss seeing us out there, but it was a decision for us, wasn't it? So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think, you know, over the time, those sort of people, you don't really hear much from them, and you hear more from the knockers. But when we made the announcement, it was just quite overwhelming, the response we had got of support from all those people that did come out, and you realise that you know, they outnumbered the knockers 50 to 1, and it was quite touching really, because you know, everyone wanted the best for us, but you know, also sort of wanted to acknowledge what we've given the industry, and to be proud of what we have achieved.
Yes, I think everybody who knows you would be in that camp, Mark and Natalie, and I'm sure those people would like to thank you for an amazing era. It hasn't ended, but it probably may have on the scale that you've conducted it, and you've conducted it so well and with such distinction that I'm sure people would like to congratulate you as much as you wanted to thank them. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.